Your salary looks ordinary because your freedom is still invisible. You answer the same messages. You could make your progress visible. That choice can look like hesitation from the outside. They cannot see what those choices are becoming. They do not see the mornings you are slowly buying back. Because this is the part of money nobody teaches without turning it into a performance. The strange part is that you may not feel wealthy either. Your life still has deadlines, errands, laundry, and a calendar full of obligations. Your savings does not applaud when you walk into a room. A lower monthly cost does not send flowers. The space you create arrives silently, one ordinary decision at a time. That silence makes the progress easy to underestimate, even when it is changing the shape of your future. You are not trying to look deprived. You are not refusing every pleasure. You are deciding which pleasures deserve to become permanent bills. That difference matters. A treat ends. A monthly obligation waits for you next month. It waits again after that. The most expensive part is not the price. It is the future work attached to the price. So your salary keeps looking boring. It enters your account, covers a life that fits, and leaves a deliberate gap. Nobody at work sees the gap. Nobody at dinner asks how many future Mondays it contains. They only see what you did not buy. They may call it caution. They may call it a phase. They may assume you are waiting to start living. But you are already living. You are removing the conditions that make your life fragile. You are building the ability to leave a bad room, survive a hard season, help someone without collapsing, or take a month to think before saying yes again. 5 years of freedom does not begin 5 years from now. It begins when your salary stops being a costume and starts becoming a tool. That is the turn. The outside may still call it ordinary. Your calendar will eventually tell a different story, because every quiet gap is learning how to become time. Chapter 1. The costume of ordinary. The world is very good at pricing visible success. It can price the car in the parking lot, the square footage of the house, the label on the shoes, and the flight posted from the airport lounge. It struggles to price a calm nervous system. It cannot easily display year without consumer debt, a low monthly floor, or the ability to absorb a surprise without begging the next paycheck for help. That is why an ordinary salary can carry two completely different lives. In one life, every raise becomes proof. The proof needs a better address, a newer vehicle, a busier social calendar, and a subscription for every inconvenience. The paycheck grows, but the room around it stays narrow. In the other life, part of each raise disappears from public view. The disappearing part does not vanish. It becomes distance. You feel that distance in small moments first. A manager sends a late message, and you notice that fear no longer arrives as quickly. A landlord mentions a future increase, and you do not immediately picture disaster. A relative asks for help, and you can answer after thinking instead of reacting from panic. These moments are not retirement. They are early evidence that your salary has begun serving you instead of supervising you. The costume of ordinary creates social friction because people use spending as a shortcut. They see what you wear and guess what you earn. They see where you live and guess what you can afford. They see what you decline and guess what you lack. You know the guesses are incomplete, but correcting every guess would destroy the privacy that makes the system work. So you learn to let some misunderstandings survive. You stop explaining why the phone still works. You stop offering a financial defense of your packed lunch. You stop translating every quiet choice into a future benefit for someone who only asked because the choice made them uncomfortable. You are not hiding out of shame. You are protecting a plan from the pressure to become visible. This protection does not require becoming cold. You can celebrate a friend without matching the purchase. You can enjoy a restaurant without making restaurants your default kitchen. You can take a trip without turning every trip into evidence that life is happening. The point is not to reject pleasure. The point is to stop renting your identity from recurring expenses. That distinction is easy to miss because recurring expenses rarely introduce themselves as chains. They arrive as conveniences, upgrades, protections, and rewards. Each one looks manageable alone. Together, they decide how much of your next month already belongs to the past. They create a minimum amount of work you must perform before your money can answer any new question. You can hear that minimum in the language around your week. You need the bonus because your rent assumes it. You need the overtime because your car expects it. You need the promotion because your subscription's already spent part of it. None of those sentences means you failed. They simply reveal how much of your effort has been assigned before your effort arrives. Once you hear the assignment, you can decide whether it still deserves your time. When your monthly floor rises, your choices shrink. A job offer with better hours but slightly lower pay becomes impossible. A temporary break becomes irresponsible. A move closer to family becomes too expensive, even when the destination costs less, because the transition needs cash. A creative project must prove itself before it has time to grow. You appear successful, but your success has very strict attendance requirements. An ordinary-looking life can reverse that arrangement. The lower floor means fewer hours of your future are already promised. Your salary does not need to impress anybody to create that result. It only needs to leave enough room between what arrives and what must leave. That room is the first piece of freedom, and it leads to a harder question. What exactly happens inside the gap? Chapter 2. The gap no one applauds. Imagine an illustrative life, not a forecast. Your gross salary is $72,000 a year. After taxes, health coverage, and retirement deductions, your usable monthly pay averages about $4,500. Your real number will vary by location, filing status, benefits, and family needs. The lesson lives in the relationship between the numbers, not in pretending one budget fits everyone. Your core life costs about $3,300 a month. Housing takes the largest piece. Food, utilities, transportation, insurance, and basic health costs fill most of the rest. That leaves roughly $1,200. The gap is not glamorous. It is not large enough to make you feel rich in a single month. It is large enough to change what 10 years can mean. You begin with $12,000 already saved. Then you direct the monthly gap into a broad, low-cost mix suited to your own risk tolerance. For illustration, assume a 5% annual return. Markets do not promise that return, and real results will move unevenly. Under that simple assumption, 10 years of steady contributions plus the starting balance grows to about $204,800. Your essential life at the original monthly floor costs $198,000 across 5 years. The illustration therefore crosses 60 months of core expenses. It does not mean you can disappear from work forever. Taxes, inflation, market losses, health costs, and changing responsibilities still matter. It means the boring gap has become a serious amount of decision time. The math is almost offensively plain. You did not find a secret asset. You did not double your money overnight. You did not need a perfect income. You made a repeated choice about the distance between income and obligation. The result became dramatic only after enough ordinary months stood beside one another. Your progress will not follow a smooth line. Some years will rise faster, some will fall. Your contribution may pause during illness, caregiving, or unemployment. The plan remains useful because you can restart it without pretending the interruption never happened. You are not protecting a perfect streak. You are protecting the habit of rebuilding the gap whenever your life gives you room. That habit matters more than any single projected return. This is why the gap receives so little applause. In month 1, it looks like $1,200 that could have upgraded your life. In month 12, it still looks smaller than a new car. In year 3, it may feel slow beside somebody else's visible purchase. The gap becomes emotionally powerful only after it starts changing decisions, and by then the habits that built it have become almost boring. The hardest part is not understanding the formula. The hardest part is surviving. The years when the result is true but not yet visible. You watch other people convert income into evidence. Your evidence remains a line on a private screen. You may feel behind even while your balance sheet is becoming stronger. That feeling can tempt you to interrupt the plan just before time begins doing the heavier work. You need a different scoreboard for those years. Instead of asking whether your life looks upgraded, ask how much of next month is already owned. Instead of comparing your car with another car, compare your current monthly floor with last year's floor. Instead of counting purchases, count options that would still remain if income paused. The scoreboard changes the emotion. A repaired appliance stops looking like a defeat because it prevented a permanent payment. A quiet weekend stops looking empty because it did not require recovery spending on Monday. A used desk stops looking temporary because it supports the Work without demanding a story about success. The gap also changes how you receive a raise. Without a plan, a raise feels like permission. With a plan, it feels like raw material. You can enjoy part of it, direct part of it, and refuse to let the entire increase become a new minimum. That refusal is where the salary stops performing for an audience and starts purchasing time for you. Chapter 3. The salary that stopped performing. Most lifestyle inflation does not feel like inflation while it is happening. It feels like catching up. You replace the furniture because the old pieces belonged to an earlier version of you. You move because the current place no longer reflects your career. You choose the premium plan because your time matters now. Each decision carries a reasonable sentence, and reasonable sentences can still build an unreasonable monthly floor. The danger is not one expensive purchase. The danger is using every improvement in income to certify a new identity. Once the identity depends on the purchase, reversing the purchase feels like losing status. You are no longer deciding whether the cost is useful. You are defending the person the cost says you have become. Your quiet system asks a different question. If nobody could see this purchase, would it still improve your life enough to deserve future work? That question does not forbid the purchase. It separates private usefulness from public proof. A comfortable chair may survive the test because your back notices it every day. A larger apartment may fail because the extra room exists mainly for an image of adulthood you rarely use. This is not a purity contest. Some months will be expensive. Some seasons will demand more. Children, health, caregiving, relocation, and safety can raise the floor for reasons that have nothing to do with showing off. Quiet progress respects those realities. It does not shame a necessary cost. It keeps unnecessary costs from disguising themselves as necessary just because everybody around you carries them. The salary that stopped performing becomes more flexible. You may decide that half of a future raise strengthens the gap before the rest changes your lifestyle. You may wait 30 days before turning a one-time inconvenience into a permanent subscription. You may keep a paid-off object one additional year and direct the absent payment toward your time reserve. These choices are not dramatic enough for a montage. They are strong enough for a life. The social pressure can be surprisingly physical. You may feel it while standing beside a coworker's new vehicle. You may feel it when a friend describes a kitchen renovation and pauses for your equivalent story. You may feel it when a family member says you work too hard to live so simply. The pressure is not really about the object. It is about belonging to the same visible timeline. You can answer that pressure without announcing your balance. You can say the current version still works. You can say you are spending differently this year. You can redirect the conversation toward the person instead of the purchase. You do not owe anyone the private number that makes your choice make sense. Over time, the lack of performance creates a new kind of confidence. You know your restraint is not temporary punishment. You know exactly what it is buying. You can enjoy a deliberate upgrade without fearing that one upgrade will recruit 5 more. The purchase becomes part of your life instead of evidence that your life has finally started. You also become harder to market to through embarrassment. An advertisement can still catch your attention. A polished room can still make your own room look unfinished. The difference is that you recognize the feeling before converting it into a payment. You give the feeling a name, let it pass through your evening, and ask again tomorrow. Your freedom grows whenever a temporary emotion fails to become a permanent obligation. That confidence matters because no financial system is tested on a calm spreadsheet. It is tested on a Tuesday when something expensive breaks, somebody needs you, and your employer chooses the same week to become uncertain. The quiet gap earns its meaning in that moment. Chapter 4. The Tuesday that tests the whole plan. The warning light appears during the drive home. The steering feels slightly wrong, and the repair shop confirms that waiting would make the problem worse. The estimate is $2,400. On the same afternoon, an executive message announces a restructuring meeting for Friday. Nothing has happened to your job yet. Your body responds as if everything has happened at once. This is where visible success and usable strength separate. A newer car might have delayed this particular repair. It might also have added a payment that was waiting before the warning light appeared. The quiet system does not guarantee that objects behave. It makes sure one broken object does not automatically break every other plan. You pay the repair from a designated cash reserve. The number on the investment screen does not need to move. Rent remains covered. Groceries remain ordinary. You do not place the repair on a card and ask the next 6 paychecks to carry it. The expense still hurts. Stability does not turn a real cost into nothing. It keeps the cost from becoming a chain of new costs. Then Friday arrives. The restructuring affects another department, but the meeting changes something in you. For the first time, you measure the job against the time reserve instead of measuring your entire life against the job. You still care about performance. You still want to do good work. Fear is no longer the only manager in the room. The shift can look small. From outside, you ask a clearer question in the meeting. You take the weekend before volunteering for another permanent responsibility. You update your resume without the frantic energy that makes every opportunity look like rescue. Your financial buffer does not write the email for you. It changes the posture from which you write it. This is the first practical return on quiet wealth. The return is not only interest, it is the reduction of forced decisions. A forced decision often carries hidden costs because speed removes comparison. You accept the first loan, the first job, the first apartment, or the first promise because waiting feels dangerous. A reserve buys waiting, and waiting can improve the choice. The test also reveals whether your monthly floor is honest. Some costs called optional are necessary when stress arrives. Reliable childcare may be essential to keep working. Therapy may protect the system more than another line in savings. A safer vehicle may be the rational choice after repeated repairs. Quiet progress is not blind loyalty to low spending. It is a clear ranking of costs by what they protect. Your ranking should include energy as well as cash. A cheap option that steals every Saturday may not be cheap. A service that keeps your health stable may protect more future income than it costs. You are not searching for the lowest possible life. You are searching for a durable life whose expenses match your values. That distinction keeps your plan humane when your circumstances become complicated. After the repair, you refill the cash reserve before increasing long-term contributions again. That pause is not failure. It is the system performing its purpose. Money moved from a quiet account into a loud problem and prevented the problem from spreading. You do not need to punish yourself for using the thing you built to be used. The following months feel less exciting because rebuilding is repetition, yet repetition after a test carries new evidence. You now know the plan can bend without snapping. You have watched an ordinary salary handle an extraordinary week. That experience makes the future feel less theoretical, and it prepares you to see the calendar hidden inside. Each recurring choice. Chapter 5. The years hiding inside monthly decisions. A monthly bill is a small claim on time. One claim rarely looks dangerous. Add enough claims together, and your future calendar starts arriving already booked. This is why the price tag is only the first number worth noticing. The second number is how many future months must keep cooperating so the purchase remains comfortable. Consider the subscriptions that replaced occasional decisions. Delivery replaces cooking on the evenings you are tired. Storage replaces deleting files you do not need. A premium tier removes an annoyance that appears twice a month. None of these is morally wrong. The problem begins when convenience becomes invisible and invisibility protects it from review. You schedule a quarterly hour to make the invisible visible. You open every recurring charge, including the ones that feel too small to matter. You do not cancel everything. You ask whether each charge returns time, health, access, or joy in proportion to the future work it requires. If the answer is yes, it stays without guilt. If the answer is vague, it must earn another quarter. The same review reaches larger commitments. Housing deserves comfort and safety, but unused square footage still asks for rent, heat, furniture, cleaning, and moving costs. Transportation deserves reliability, but a vehicle can become a second employer when the payment, insurance, maintenance, and parking demand too much of the salary. The sticker price never tells the full story because the object recruits an ecosystem. When you lower one recurring cost, the first benefit is monthly. The second benefit is cumulative. The third benefit is behavioral. You prove that your flaw is not a law of nature. It can be redesigned. That proof makes the next review easier because you stop treating every current expense as part of your personality. You may discover that the most valuable change is not cancellation. It may be changing frequency, renegotiating a rate, sharing an underused tool, or moving one habit closer to home. Your system does not demand dramatic gestures, it rewards repeatable improvements. A change you can maintain for 5 years is usually more powerful than a severe cut you reverse. After 5 weeks, years begin hiding inside those decisions. A reduced monthly floor means the same savings balance covers more time. If your essentials fall by 10%, each dollar in the reserve gains reach without earning an extra return. You are working on both sides of the equation, building the pool and lowering the amount required to cross each month. This is also why a raise matters more when it does not trigger an equal upgrade. If income rises while the floor stays mostly stable, the gap widens quickly. You can direct some of the increase toward present enjoyment and still accelerate the future. The goal is not to freeze your life. It is to stop every good year from creating a more demanding next year. The calendar becomes a better visual than the balance. You begin measuring progress in months of core expenses rather than in a number that competes with everybody else's number. 1 month means 1 month to recover. 6 months means a longer search. A year means a different relationship with risk. 5 years means the ability to redesign a chapter of life instead of merely surviving an interruption. That time is not permission to ignore work, markets, taxes, or health insurance. It is permission to think beyond the next deposit. You might use part of it for a career change, caregiving, study, a slower transition, or simply the confidence to refuse a damaging environment. The exact use remains yours. The important fact is that the option exists before the crisis chooses for you. And then the strangest moment arrives. Someone notices. The invisible system becomes visible for a second, and you must decide whether to explain the years nobody saw. You building. Chapter 6. The day your quiet progress gets discovered. Discovery rarely arrives as a dramatic reveal. It may begin when you decline an assignment that requires constant travel. A coworker warns that refusing could hurt your position. You answer calmly that the trade no longer works for your life. The calmness creates the question, how can you be so certain when everybody else is calculating the risk? Or discovery arrives when you take unpaid time to help a parent. Someone assumes you received money, sold something, or got unusually lucky. The idea that an ordinary salary built the space feels less believable than a sudden event. Sudden events are easier stories. Repeated restraint has no cinematic moment, so people underestimate it. You have choices about what to share. Privacy can remain part of the plan. You can explain the principle without naming the balance. You can say that your fixed costs stayed low while your pay grew. You can say that you built a reserve before needing it. You can say that the freedom came from many ordinary months, not one extraordinary break. The reaction may surprise you. Some people will hear judgment even when you offer none. Your choices can make another person's choices feel exposed. You do not need to defend your plan by attacking theirs. Structural pressures differ. Family responsibilities differ. Health, housing, debt, and timing differ. A quiet system should create compassion, not a new reason to feel superior. You may also meet someone who earns less and has built more room than you. Let that observation teach without humiliating you. Your starting point, obligations, and timing are different. The useful question is not who won. The useful question is, which decision in your own life can become lighter next? Quiet progress works because you can begin from the month you actually have, not the month you wish you had started. Others will become curious because your explanation gives shape to something they wanted but could not name. They may have assumed freedom required a spectacular income. Your ordinary salary offers a less glamorous possibility. Freedom can also come from preserving the gap, lowering the floor, and allowing time to repeat the work. This is where your example becomes useful without becoming a performance. You can show a process instead of a trophy. You can describe the quarterly review, the raise rule, the cash reserve, and the months of expenses measure. You can admit the repairs, the slow years, and the moments when you wanted to make progress visible. The truth is more helpful than a perfect image. Discovery can also test your own identity. If people finally recognize the result, you may feel tempted to prove it with a purchase. The old urge returns in a new costume. You have built freedom, and now part of you wants the world to confirm it. That is understandable. Recognition feels warm. It can also turn the private engine back into public performance. You do not have to live small forever to stay free. You can choose a larger life where it matters. The question is whether the larger choice expresses a real value or asks strangers to validate the years. A meaningful trip, a safer home, or more generous support for family can fit the plan. An object bought mainly to correct someone's guess may cost more than money. The best proof of progress is not that everybody knows. It is that you no longer need everybody to know. Your salary has already performed the important task. It turned repeated work into repeated options. The final step is to protect those options with rules clear enough to survive both pressure and success. Chapter 7. The 5-Year Freedom Test. The framework begins with a simple measurement. Divide liquid, accessible assets by your minimum monthly cost. The answer is the number of months your current system could carry before. New income. Investments meant for retirement may have taxes, penalties, or market risk, so label accounts honestly. The purpose is clarity, not a flattering total. Rule 1. Keep 1 month of core expenses in cash before asking long-term investments to handle emergencies. This is the first shock absorber. Your exact target may be higher if income is unstable, health needs are unpredictable, or several people depend on you. Rule 2. Direct at least half of every permanent raise toward the freedom gap before upgrading recurring costs. The other half can improve life now. This rule lets present comfort and future space grow together instead of forcing one to defeat the other. Rule 3. Wait 30 days before adding any recurring expense that will survive the original problem. A temporary inconvenience should not automatically become a permanent bill. If the value remains clear after 30 days, the decision is more likely to be deliberate. Rule 4. Review your monthly floor every 3 months and remove one cost that no longer returns time, health, access, or joy. The target is not endless cutting. The target is preventing forgotten decisions from quietly owning future work. Rule 5. Recalculate your months of freedom twice a year and write one choice that the added time now protects. A number without a purpose becomes another scoreboard. A named option turns the number back into a life. These rules work together. Cash absorbs the first hit. The raise rule widens the gap. The waiting period blocks impulsive permanence. The quarterly review keeps the floor honest. The twice yearly calculation connects accumulation with actual choices. None requires an impressive salary. Each requires consistency strong enough to look boring. Your written plan should fit on one page. Put your core monthly cost at the top. Put your current months of freedom beneath it. Then record your raise rule, waiting rule, review date, and the option your reserve protects. You should be able to understand the page when you are tired, worried, or excited. Complexity is not sophistication when it prevents you from acting. You can adapt the thresholds without abandoning the framework. A household with variable income may need more cash. A household with expensive medical care may define core costs differently. Someone close to retirement may hold a different mix than someone early in a career. The numbers in this story are illustrative, not a forecast, and your real plan should reflect taxes, benefits, risk, and professional advice when needed. The 5-year target is not a command to stop working. It is a test of how much of your life has become negotiable. At 1 month, a repair feels different. At 6 months, a job search feels different. At 1 year, a transition feels different. At 5 years, you can imagine a new chapter without asking the next paycheck to approve every sentence. That imagination is practical. You can see a caregiving season before it arrives. You can consider a lower-paid role that protects your health. You can take a measured risk without pretending risk disappeared. You can stay in a good job because you choose it, not because every bill has already voted for you. The system also protects joy. When you know what the gap is for, spending from the remaining money becomes easier. You can enjoy a dinner, a trip, or a useful upgrade without turning the purchase into proof or guilt. Freedom is not built by fearing every dollar. It is built by giving different dollars different jobs. Now compress the framework. 1 month in cash. Half of each permanent raise toward the gap. 30 days before a new recurring expense. 1 honest review every 3 months. 1 month of freedom calculation twice a year. The rules are deliberately plain because a rule you can remember on a tired Tuesday is stronger than a perfect plan you only understand on Sunday. What is one recurring cost you could afford right now, but your future freedom would thank you for not adding? Put the specific choice in the comments. It may help another person. Recognize the quiet trade hiding inside an ordinary month. Like and subscribe if you are building a life where money creates room instead of applause. This channel is for working adults who want clear numbers, calm choices, and freedom that does not need to perform. Your salary may still look ordinary tomorrow morning. You may carry the same bag through the same door and heat the same lunch. Nobody will see 5 years of options sitting beside you. That is no longer the strange part. The strange part is how much freedom an ordinary salary can build once it stops trying to look extraordinary.